The scream ripped through the penthouse like a blade through silk, shattering the sterile quiet of the 47th floor. It wasn't a child's tantrum or a cry for attention, it was raw, jagged, a sound that clawed from a place so deep it felt like the building itself was bleeding. Marcus Tate froze, his dust cloth caught mid-swipe across a rosewood table, lemon polish dripping onto his calloused hands. 6 days he'd been here, a temp cleaner in the Sterling Heights Tower, Manhattan's coldest altar to wealth, scraping by to pay his sister's hospital bills. The 47th floor was his prison, a maze of glass and chrome where voices echoed like ghosts. But the 48th? No one spoke of it. The staff whispered it was cursed, a place where shadows screamed and silence suffocated. Another cry, shrill and cyclical, punched through the air from above, each wail a hammer to Marcus's chest. He dropped the cloth, his boots already moving toward the spiral staircase, heart pounding like a war drum. He was nobody here, a black man in a borrowed uniform, invisible to the gods of this glass empire. But that sound, that desperate, spiraling plea, was one he knew too well. It was his nephew Jamal, rocking under a Brooklyn kitchen table, hands clamped over his ears, drowning in a world too loud, too sharp. Marcus had held him through those storms, signing words under flickering bulbs when words failed. He couldn't walk away from this. "Mr. Tate." The head housekeeper's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp as a whip. "Stay in your zone. The upper floor's forbidden." He didn't answer. His boots hit the stairs, each step a defiance of this cold, ordered world. The 48th floor hallway stretched like a mausoleum, lined with abstract paintings that cost more than his life. At the end, a door hung half open, leaking flickering light from a sensory projector. Inside, a girl, maybe 8, sat curled on a plush rug, her small body rocking violently, her forehead slamming rhythmically against a padded wall. No nanny, no parent, just her and her pain, looping like a broken machine. Her dark curls stuck to her tear-streaked face, her hands clawing at her own arms as if to escape her skin. Marcus stopped at the threshold, his breath catching. Every nerve screamed to turn back. He was a cleaner, a nobody, replaceable. One wrong move, and he'd be out, his sister's meds unpaid, her oxygen tank a dream. But that cry, it was Jamal's cry, the kind that said the world was too much, too cruel. He stepped inside, slow, deliberate, and crouched a few feet away, his knees creaking on the rug. "Hey, little one," he whispered, voice barely cutting through her sobs. "I ain't comin' closer. Just sittin' here, okay? You're not alone." Her rocking slowed, just a hair. Marcus kept his hands visible, palms up, scarred from years in warehouses and worse. Slowly, he traced a sign across his chest, calm, a gesture his sister, Lena, taught him when Jamal's world spun out of control. The girl's eyes flicked toward him, wide and wild, then dropped back to the floor. Her fingers dug harder into her arms, but the thumping stopped, the rhythm broken. A voice like a gunshot exploded behind him. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Marcus spun. Victor Sterling stood in the doorway, a towering figure in a tailored black suit, his presence a storm of controlled fury. His gray eyes burned through Marcus, sharp as broken glass, one hand clutching a phone, the other gripping the doorframe like he could snap it in half. The billionaire's aura filled the room, heavy, suffocating, a man who owned the world and expected it to kneel. "I'm sorry, sir," Marcus said, standing, hands still open, heart hammering. "Heard her crying. Thought she was hurt. Who gave you permission to be up here?" Victor's voice was ice, each word a warning shot. "This is my daughter's room." "Nobody, sir. Marcus's voice stayed steady, but his pulse roared. "I couldn't ignore it. Step away from her. Now." Marcus obeyed, stepping back, his boots heavy on the rug. Victor strode forward, his polished shoes silent, his face a mask of barely contained rage. He reached for the girl, Lila. Marcus had overheard the staff whisper, but the moment his hands touched her, she detonated. Her scream spiked, raw and piercing, her small fists pounding his chest, legs kicking with a force that staggered him. Victor froze, his composure cracking, eyes wide with something close to fear. "What's wrong with her?" he muttered, voice breaking. "Why does she—" "May I, sir?" Marcus's voice was soft, steady, cutting through the chaos. Victor didn't answer, but his silence was permission. Marcus knelt again, a few feet away, signing calm with deliberate slowness. Lila's screams faltered, her body still trembling but slowing. Her eyes locked on his hands, then, in a single, desperate motion, she lunged toward him, collapsing into his arms. Her small hands gripped his sleeve, her face buried in his shoulder, her sobs muffled against his worn shirt. The room fell silent, the air thick with something sacred. Victor stared, his mouth slightly open, as if the world had shifted beneath him. Marcus swayed gently, holding Lila without crushing her, the way he'd learned with Jamal, present, but not overpowering. I didn't do anything special, sir, he said quietly. Just listened. And signed. You know sign language? Victor's voice softened, curiosity edging out anger. A little. My nephew, Jamal, he was non-verbal. Autistic. This helped him when things got too loud. Victor's posture shifted, his suit suddenly too tight, his presence less like a storm and more like a man caught off guard. What's your name? Marcus Tate, sir. I clean the lower floors. You're not a therapist? No, sir. Just a cleaner. Victor's eyes lingered on Lila, her breathing steady now, her small form curled against Marcus like he was the only safe harbor in a sea of chaos. Can you stay a bit longer today? Marcus nodded, still swaying. Yes, sir. Victor turned, walking out slowly, his steps hesitant. For the first time in years, the penthouse didn't vibrate with tension. No slammed doors, no barked orders, just a quiet that felt like a held breath, fragile and fleeting. An hour later, Marcus descended the spiral staircase, his back aching from holding Lila so long. She'd fallen asleep in his arms, her face pressed into his shoulder, her small hand clutching his shirt like a lifeline. He'd laid her on a beanbag in her sensory room, covering her with a weighted blanket he found folded on a shelf, its edges frayed from use. The penthouse felt heavier now, its glass walls and chrome fixtures a cold cage, trapping wealth and grief in equal measure. Marcus was a temp, a nobody in this world of power. He'd crossed a line, and he braced for the fallout, termination, maybe worse. Mr. Tate. Victor's voice cut through the silence, sharp but not cruel. Marcus turned. The billionaire stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed, his face unreadable. In his hand was a leather notebook, the kind that carried consequences, firings, lawsuits, power plays. My office. Now. Marcus followed, his boots echoing on the polished marble, each step a reminder of his place. The office was a fortress of control, a black walnut desk, walls lined with books that had never been opened, and a view of Manhattan's skyline that made the world below feel like a distant dream. Victor gestured to a chair. Sit. Marcus sat, hands folded, waiting for the axe to fall. Victor leaned back, tapping a pen against the notebook, the silence stretching like a taut wire. The city's hum was a faint pulse through the glass. You handled her like you'd done it 100 times, Victor said finally, his voice low, probing. Not her, sir. Someone like her. My nephew, Jamal. He passed 3 years ago. He was 9. Victor's eyes flicked up, a flicker of something human, grief, maybe, crossing his face. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Another silence, heavier this time. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his desk. No specialist, no nanny, no expert has calmed Lila like that. Not in years. They all failed, PhDs, therapists, you name it. You walked in with a rag and fixed her. I didn't fix her, sir, Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. I saw her. Kids like Lila don't need fixing. They need someone to sit in their silence, to hear what they're screaming without words. Victor blinked, the pen stilling in his hand. His gray eyes studied Marcus, not with judgment but with something closer to awe. You sound like you should be doing more than cleaning floors. I'm just someone who needed a job, sir. My sister, Lena, she's got medical bills stacking higher than this tower. This pays better than the warehouse. Victor closed the notebook, the sound sharp in the quiet. I want to make you an offer. Marcus's breath caught, his hands tightening in his lap. Sir? I need someone who can reach Lila. Not another expert with a clipboard and a deadline. Someone she trusts. You. I'm not a nanny, sir. I don't need a nanny. I need you. Victor's voice was unyielding, a man used to getting his way. I'll triple your pay. Private suite in the staff wing, expenses covered, weekends off, health insurance. No more cleaning. Marcus's mind spun. Triple pay could mean oxygen tanks for Lena, no more choosing between her meds and groceries. But Lila wasn't a paycheck. She was a child, her trust fragile as glass. If he failed her, it wouldn't be a job lost, it would be a betrayal, a wound deeper than money could fix. I don't know if I'm qualified, sir. Victor's eyes narrowed, not with anger but conviction. I've had specialists from Harvard, therapists from London, counselors charging thousands an hour. None lasted a month. You walked in, said nothing, and she trusted you. That's rarer than any degree. Marcus stared at his hands, scarred from years of labor, now flecked with polish residue. He thought of Lena, coughing through the night in their cramped apartment. He thought of Jamal, his small hand signing love under a dim bulb. He thought of Lila's cry, echoing Jamal's. When would I start? Tomorrow. The suite's being prepared now. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. Okay. I'll try. Victor extended his hand. Marcus shook it, firm, steady, the weight of the moment sinking into his bones. As he left the office, the city's skyline loomed through the glass, indifferent, but something in Marcus burned, a spark, a purpose, something he hadn't felt since Jamal. The next morning, Marcus arrived with a duffel bag and a cardboard box, his life distilled to essentials. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Lang, a woman with eyes like steel and a voice to match, led him to a suite in the staff wing. It was small but warm, with a single window framing Central Park's treetops, their green a stark contrast to the penthouse's cold chrome. "Mr. Sterling had this redone overnight," she said, handing him a keycard. "Said you're not just staff." "I'm here to help," Marcus replied, unpacking a photo of Lena and Jamal, their smiles frozen in a Brooklyn summer. He set it on the nightstand, a tether to the world below. Mrs. Lang's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "He doesn't redo rooms for help." By 9 a.m., Marcus stood outside Lila's sensory room, its walls lined with soft panels and glowing projectors. She was awake, sorting colored beads into piles, blue, red, her hands moving with frantic precision. "Morning, Lila," he said softly, his voice a low hum. She didn't look up, but her hands paused, just a beat. He sat cross-legged a few feet away, mirroring her rhythm, sorting beads of his own. After a moment, she nudged a green bead toward him, her fingers trembling. He smiled, nudging a yellow one back. A silent language bloomed. Hours passed in that quiet dance, the room a cocoon against the penthouse's sterile hum. Marcus hummed an old blues tune, low and steady, one Jamal used to sway to in their cramped kitchen. Lila didn't flinch, she leaned closer, just a fraction, her eyes flicking to his face. Victor watched from the doorway, his usual sharpness dulled, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his presence softer, like a man seeing daylight after years in the dark. Weeks bled into one another, Marcus's presence a steady pulse in the penthouse's cold veins. Lila hadn't spoken, but her gestures grew bolder, handing him beads, brushing his sleeve, once even mimicking his sign for happy, her small hands clumsy but sure. Victor joined them sometimes, his attempts at signs awkward but earnest, play, safe, love. The penthouse began to hum, not with noise but with something alive, something that hadn't been there before. One evening, Marcus sat in the staff garden, a rooftop oasis where ivy curled over iron trellises and the city's glow felt a world away. He held a mug of chamomile tea, its warmth a small rebellion against the penthouse's chill. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. Victor stood, holding two mugs, his tie loosened, his face less like a CEO and more like a man carrying ghosts. "Thought you might want company," Victor said, offering a mug. Marcus took it, the ceramic warm against his palms. "Didn't peg you for a tea guy." Victor chuckled, sitting beside him, close but not crowding. "Bourbon's too heavy tonight." They sipped in silence, the city's pulse a faint drone below. Victor spoke first, voice low, hesitant. "Your nephew, what happened?" Marcus exhaled, the memory sharp as broken glass. "Seizure. Infection got him before we could. He was gone in the hospital while I was signing paperwork." Victor's eyes softened, a crack in his armor. "I'm sorry." "He was my shadow," Marcus said, voice rough. "Saw me for me, no expectations. Just love." Victor nodded, his gaze on the skyline, its lights cold and distant. "Sounds like Lila." The silence stretched, not heavy but shared. Victor spoke again, quieter. "I want to learn how you reach her. I want to be the father she needs." Marcus met his eyes, unflinching. "You don't need to be perfect. Just show up. She'll teach you the rest." Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded, the weight of the words sinking in. The next morning, the world cracked open. A sharp knock shattered the penthouse's quiet, not a delivery but something cold, official. Victor opened the door to a man in a gray suit, flanked by two others, one with an earpiece, their faces blank as stone. "Child Welfare Services," the man said, holding a clipboard, his voice flat. "We're here about your daughter, Lila Sterling." Victor's face hardened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "This is absurd. Who filed this?" "We can't disclose that," the man replied, his tone clipped. "May we come in?" "Not until I speak to my lawyer," Victor said, his voice a blade, sharp and unyielding. Marcus stepped forward, Lila clinging to his side, her small hands digging into his arm. "She's safe," he said, his voice steady but burning. "I'm with her every day. There's no neglect." The man studied him, eyes cold, assessing. "And you are?" "Marcus Tate. Her caregiver." They entered, their gazes sweeping the penthouse like vultures over a corpse. The glass walls reflected their movements, the chrome fixtures glinting like knives. Marcus held Lila close, signing safe over and over, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. She pressed closer, her trembling easing. The inspection found nothing, no dirt, no chaos, just a sterile cage of wealth. But as they left, the lead agent turned, his voice low. Off the record, Mr. Sterling, your daughter's well cared for. Whoever filed this had other motives. Victor's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with fury. I know who. In Victor's office, the air was thick with rage. Marcus stood by the window, Lila asleep in the next room, while Victor convened a meeting with their lawyer, Claire Voss, a woman with a razor-sharp mind and a voice like steel, and Dana Wells, a security expert whose calm demeanor hid decades of digging through corporate dirt. This isn't random, Victor said, his voice low, dangerous. My company's pushing a merger with Horizon Tech. Someone's hitting back, through Lila. Dana nodded, her tablet glowing with data. We traced it. An old assistant, Karen Holt, still had access to your calendar. She's with Apex Innovations now, engaged to their VP, Greg Sinclair. Victor's fist slammed the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. This is personal. We file a countersuit, Claire said, her pen poised. Expose them for defamation, emotional trauma, abuse of the system. But they'll dig into Marcus's life too. Marcus met Victor's eyes, unflinching. I've got nothing to hide. And if you did, Victor said, his voice fierce, it wouldn't matter. You're family now. Marcus's breath caught, the word family landing like a stone in his chest. He thought of Lena, of Jamal, of the life he'd scraped together from nothing. Family wasn't just blood, it was the people you fought for. The courtroom was a crucible, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters buzzing like flies. Marcus sat beside Victor, his heart steady despite the chaos. Judge Evelyn Carter, a woman with a no-nonsense gaze and gray hair pulled tight, called order, her gavel a thunderclap. Apex's lawyers painted Marcus as an opportunist, a lowlife meddling in a billionaire's world, their words dripping with condescension. But when Marcus took the stand, his voice was raw, unfiltered, cutting through the room like a blade. I found Lila screaming, alone, he said, his eyes locked on the judge. No one was there. Just her, breaking against a wall. I stayed because I know what it's like to be invisible. My nephew was like her, autistic, nonverbal, lost in a world that didn't care. I couldn't walk away. The room stilled, the air heavy with his truth. Even Apex's lawyer faltered, his notes slipping in his hand. Judge Carter's eyes softened, her voice steady. Thank you, Mr. Tate. Outside, reporters swarmed, their questions venomous, gold digger, manipulator, fraud. Marcus walked through them, chin high, ignoring their barbs. Victor's hand at his back was a quiet anchor. You didn't bend, Victor said later, in the car, his voice low with respect. I don't, Marcus replied, his eyes on the city blurring past. That night, Lila signed happy to Marcus, her small hand sure, her eyes bright with trust. Victor watched, then pulled out a photo album, its pages worn from love. Grace, Lila's mother, glowed in every frame, laughing in a park, cradling baby Lila, her smile a light that hadn't faded. I failed her, Victor admitted, his voice raw. Shut down after she died. Buried myself in work, in control, as if it could bring her back. You survived, Marcus said, his voice steady but warm. Now you're living. Victor's eyes met his, a spark of something new, hope, maybe. So are you. They embraced, not as employer and employee, but as two men bound by loss and redemption. Upstairs, Lila stirred in her sleep and whispered, Papa. The word cracked the penthouse's silence like a stone through glass, raw and real. The court ruled in their favor, dismissing Apex's claims with prejudice. Judge Carter's words echoed through the chaos, Mr. Tate's actions reflect a moral standard we should all aspire to. The press softened, some calling Marcus a hero, others still spitting venom. He didn't care. He'd stayed for Lila, not for headlines. Weeks later, Marcus stood in a community center on the edge of Harlem, its walls peeling but alive with children's laughter. He taught sign language to kids like Lila, their hands clumsy but eager, their smiles a mirror of Jamal's. Victor joined sometimes, his signs awkward but determined, Lila at his side, her trust a quiet miracle. One spring morning, a photo sat on Victor's desk, Marcus and Lila laughing under an oak in Central Park, sunlight filtering through the leaves, their faces alive with joy. Above it, engraved words, family is where storms break. Below, Marcus's quote, justice isn't loud. It's showing up and staying. But the storm wasn't over. Late one night, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, you don't belong here. He'll see you for what you are. The words burned, a reminder of the world's cruelty, the whispers that followed a black man in a billionaire's orbit. Marcus deleted it, but the venom lingered, a shadow in the penthouse's sterile glow. Victor found him on the rooftop garden, the city sprawling below, its lights cold and distant. Another one, he asked, his voice tight with anger. Marcus nodded, his jaw set. They're not just after you. They're after me, because I'm the weak link. You're not weak, Victor said, his voice fierce. You're the strongest thing in this house. Marcus met his eyes, the weight of the words sinking in. Then we fight. For Lila. Victor nodded, his hand brushing Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, not pity. For Lila. The fight spilled into the streets, the press, the boardrooms. Apex's attacks grew uglier, leaks about Marcus's past, his sister's debts, his years in foster care. But Marcus stood tall, his truth louder than their lies. He taught Lila new signs, strong, home, and she mirrored them, her small hands a quiet rebellion against the chaos. Victor learned too, his fingers clumsy but his heart open, each sign a step toward his daughter. One evening, as the city's lights flickered below, Marcus sat with Lila in her sensory room, a soft glow bathing the space. She handed him a red bead, then signed love, her eyes bright. Marcus's throat tightened, the memory of Jamal's hands flashing in his mind. Victor watched from the doorway, his face soft, unguarded. You're changing her, Victor said, his voice low, raw. And me. Marcus looked up, his eyes steady. You're changing yourself. I'm just here. Victor stepped closer, his hand resting on Marcus's shoulder, a touch that said more than words. You're more than here. You're home. Lila stirred, her voice a whisper, barely audible but earth-shaking. Marcus. Her first word in years, raw and fragile, hung in the air like a prayer. Marcus froze, tears burning his eyes. Victor's breath caught, his hand tightening on Marcus's shoulder. The penthouse, once a cage of grief, felt alive, its silence no longer cold but warm, full of possibility. Months later, the fight with Apex ended in a courtroom victory, but the real triumph was quieter. Marcus became a fixture at the community center, his classes overflowing with kids who signed their truths in bold, clumsy gestures. Victor rebuilt his life, not as a billionaire but as a father, signing with Lila under Central Park's oaks, their laughter a defiance of the world's cruelty. The photo on Victor's desk grew worn from touch, Marcus and Lila, sunlight in their eyes, the city a blur behind them. The engraved words above it held, family is where storms break. Below, Marcus's truth, justice isn't loud. It's showing up and staying. And in the quiet of the penthouse, where grief once ruled, three souls, Marcus, Victor, Lila, built something unbreakable, not with money or power, but with the raw, unfiltered truth of love.